Hello and welcome to the Bald Ambition podcast. I'm your bald host, Mookie Spitz, and the one who's overflowing with ambition today is Mr. Adam Swart. He is founder of Crowds on Demand. Welcome aboard, Adam.
Mookie, it's great to be with you. In preparation for this, I just put in some volumizing shampoo for my hair.
Outstanding. You have a full bouffant.
I'm
so
trying.
I want to begin this conversation with the expression of jealousy in terms of your follicular content. Your reputation overall precedes you. You've been on the airways, the internets, Newsmax, News Nation. Chris Cuomo had a conversation with you. You've been on Fox News, and sometimes it gets into some contentious categories of discourse. So can you tell us a little bit to frame the conversation about yourself, about your company, about your mission, and why you think every time you appear on a podcast or on the news, people get excited?
Yeah, and so my name is Adam Swart, CEO, founder, Crowds on Demand. We're the largest protest company in the country. I like to say the world, but I can't prove it because there could be someone in India or something who's doing it on a bigger scale than what I'm doing, and I just don't know about it. So I don't like to say the world. But what we specialize in is whether it's for politics, advocacy, companies, disputes, or simply publicity, gathering crowds, gathering people out there, publicizing really cool stories, and getting the word out there. You asked me why I tend to arouse certain feelings in people. Is I think people are not thrilled with how they're constantly being marketed to by the media, and by politicians, by companies. And I think in some cases they want to label me and my company as sort of the archetypal villain in this story of how people are manipulated. Now, I told you off air, but I'll tell your listeners on air, I don't believe what we do is manipulation. What we do is we're like the town crier. We serve as a catalyst. If you have a really good message, there's so many great messages that never get across to people. And we make sure that people hear the message, whether it's making sure the right elected officials hear it, the right customers hear it. We make sure people hear your message. Then it's on you to make sure you have a good message where that will fly once it is heard. Right? We've done a lot of campaigns that aren't as good messages. The message doesn't fly, and ultimately it is not successful. Right? So, but I think I think sometimes why we arouse such strong feelings is because people feel like, wow, I'm being marketed to on TV, I'm being marketed to on my computer, I'm being marketed to on my phone, and now I feel like when I see a protest, I don't fully understand I'm being marketed to via a protest, right? And I think that has always been the case, but my existence, I think maybe puts it in more stark terms than people have thought through before. And I think that's my best speculation.
Yeah, I liken your company and your mission as a mirror of hypocrisy, in a sense, a double standard where the feeling seems to be ubiquitous of free choice and free action when it comes to the expression of opinion, specifically in politics. So if you have a protest, you have a gathering, you have an expression on social media, the volition seems to be individual, and it seems to be outside of the influence of the powers that be. I worked in marketing, specifically in PR, for a number of years. And I can recall personally how, when I was hired at one of the major PR firms in New York City, the national manager took the New York Times of that day, opened it up, and he pointed to specific articles in the newspaper, and he said, Come here, Spitz. That's ours. that's ours, and this is ours. And that
Yes,
was my introduction to traditional public relations.
yes.
So, can you tell our listeners specifically what and how you do what you do, and illustrate how it might not be too different from my own experience working at a fairly traditional public relations firm in
Yes.
terms of influencing public opinion?
Yeah, correct. And it's really no different from that, right? So, traditional PR firms tend to market through relationships with journalists, right? So, you give a journalist a scoop on a story. Now, that journalist owes you, and they're going to write a more favorable story for you when you call in that favor. I mean, if you are a good PR person, that's how you do it. You're not just sending pitches, you're building those relationships where you have people who owe you and therefore are going to write a certain type of piece for you. Right? I mean, look at Jeffrey Epstein as a great example of someone who got a lot of great publicity for a lot of years based on his philanthropy and his relationships, right? He was always in the tabloids. This is a guy, he paid the right people so that you would know he was there with Bill Clinton and Andrew and Bill Gates and all these people. And that made him look basically, hey, this is the Titanic. You can't sink this guy, so don't even try. Doesn't matter what you think you have on him. Harvey Weinstein, same kind of deal, right? Um, so so basically that's the traditional PR world, and it's very effective. So I'm not saying that that world isn't effective. What we do is is in line with that. What we do is we get your when you have a protest, when you have a giant crowd of people, you're setting the context for a lot of attention. You're giving the media something to cover, right? So if your goal is to get media coverage, the media likes to have a backdrop of a visual, right? Let's just say you have an amazing message. Let's just say MLK was giving a I have the dream speech, but only 10 people were in attendance. I don't know whether it would have made the national news with 10 people. It made the national news because there was a million people, right? So you're creating the right context that now the media can say protest is out there, right? And ideally, you're also tapping into media's preconceived biases, right? So MSNBC is going to cover liberal protests and they're going to do it more positively. Fox News is going to take liberal protests and try to mock them and try to find the people who say the stupidest things and try to make them look smaller, and vice versa on the other side, right? So that part of planning this stuff is understanding the media landscape and understanding who's has what incentive to say what. Um, so what we do though by organizing demonstrations is number one, you can of course get the media attention that was alluded to, but you're also having something that media can't do, which is make sure that you pay attention every single day. We've had events outside the offices of corporate CEOs, right? And we're protesting every single day, 9 to 5. So you see them every single day when you're going to work, and you see them every single day when you're leaving. Or maybe it's outside a regulatory agency, right? Where you're able to get your message across and make sure the right people see it and keep it in their consciousness, right? So even short of getting media attention, you're able to make sure that people are seeing it and potentially make sure your prospective customers are seeing it. So, okay, let's just say the CEO at a company had a Me Too scandal. Now you have protests outside the stores of that company saying, "Hey, this CEO has a Me Too scandal." Well, now the customers are going to kind of consider that when they're going into the store. So you're able to get a lot of messages across, and sometimes you're able to break through a media system. So sometimes our customers come to us because they feel like the traditional media outlets are not giving them the coverage that they need through the traditional PR angle. So what sometimes you need to force your way into that public consciousness through something like what we do.
So it's similar and it's different from
Yeah,
what we would consider traditional PR. So again, going back to my
sure.
personal experience, we organized flash mobs
Yeah.
that would demonstrate excitement about a product or service on Fifth Avenue near Madison Square Garden. And the mechanism of this was getting folks who were influencers,
Yeah.
folks who were into a particular product or service, disseminate the information ahead of time, and ultimately act as a catalyst for exactly what you're describing.
Yes.
Now, there's two different elements, though, I think, with what you're doing, which is intentionality. And the other one is the actual mechanism of bringing about these crowds and how you organize them, how you distribute information about them. So let's go into that a little bit, because I think those are the areas of contention, which
Sure.
is you are being hired by individual. And again, I don't mean to compromise your client list, because that's obviously, you're a business and I'll respect that. But presumably you are hired by high net worth individuals,
Or company.
corporations, political parties
Correct.
to do pretty much the same thing, but much more systematically and comprehensively. So can you share exactly what this looks like? I'm a bald guy with money, and I contact Adam at Crowds on Demand, and I've got an axe to grind. It could be political. To your point, it could be litigious. It could just be messaging, or I might just like Lego and foot massages. So I'm trying to get the word out. I contact you, and what happens, and how do you do what you do?
Well, let's just say you have a problem with a particular company. Maybe you have a problem with Rogaine. You think it's giving people false hope. Um, you think that it's giving people false hope. Well, okay. Well, let's look at the studies, right? So maybe they're engaging hypothetically in false marketing, right? And you're so rich, you say we want to be like Larry David, like we want to be proud of being bald, right? So we don't want to run from that. So we protest Rogaine, right? And say, okay, we're gonna have create first of all, we're going to create an organization potentially that says, hey, we're bald pride, right? We're proud of that, right? And we're sexy, right? We have the Rock on our side, right? We have you know uh, like Kobe Bryant was bald, right? All these really cool.
Yeah, Michael Jordan, Telly Savalas. We've got advocates that you could tap right into.
Exactly. So maybe you incentivize those people. What we like to do is create a whole organization sometimes to serve as the focal point of the campaign, right? Now it would help in this case if Rogaine were offering misleading claims on that, because then you protest outside where they're presenting and say, hey, here's actually the experience, here's the side effects of the Rogaine, right? Here's what it may have done, right? And so you have protesters, right? Hopefully, you have generally what's the other misnomer out there on the internet is that we have people who hire people who have no interest in a cause, right? Generally, when we bring people in, we found it's more effective to have people who are interested in the cause. We compensate them for their time, but not for their views, right? So we have people who are interested. We have signs, we have banners. We often create a whole organization, a website around it, right? And we identify typically who are we trying to persuade. Now, maybe this isn't a good example because this is a mass market. Sometimes it's easier when you have a case where you actually only have to persuade a few hundred people. You're looking to persuade these corporate executives about this or that. So then you can say, hey, we're going to go to this conference, we're going to go to that conference, we're going to protest, right? Um I'll give you an example. Like I try not to talk about recent events because it's more sensitive, but one of my favorite cause that we've ever done was called Delete Facebook. Um and this was during the period after the 2016 election, 17, 18, 19, where there's a lot of
I
them.
just want to say that the efficacy of your campaign, I didn't know you did this. So
Yeah.
when you say delete Facebook, I knew about it.
Right. And it's this
So bravo, you outmarketed the marketer in the sense of creating a campaign that I'm
and it's
hearing about.
funny that it well, I don't take full credit for it because there were a lot of factors in there, but I take partial credit for them actually changing their name, right? Because the Facebook brand became associated with manipulating Americans against each other, right against left, left against right, and people in foreign countries, right? I mean, a lot of people forget, but they caused a genocide in Myanmar, right? Facebook, the platform, was used to actually create, essentially to whip up misinformation and hostility of ethnic groups against each
Yeah,
other.
factually correct, folks. If you're skeptical about what Adam's saying, chat GPT it or Google it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Facebook did all that, right? And I turned out conservatives hate Facebook because they were perceived as kind of this liberal Silicon Valley company. Liberals hate Facebook because there's a perception that the Trump campaign kind of used it, and Russia used it for the favor of Trump. So we basically did an apolitical effort to say, hey, Facebook, delete Facebook. This company is really doing a lot of damage to our country. And look, Facebook is still around. Zuckerberg is probably richer than ever. But it changed the perception of Facebook. They changed their name to Meta. They eliminated political ads, or at least dramatically scaled that back. And they basically because their whole name was basically toxic. So now we were tapping into sentiment that was already there, but they basically were like, hey, we've got to change the way that we do business because people are so sick of how we do things. So it's one of the ones that I'm most proud of, because of that. So and I can't say who specifically funded it, but it was people who actually made a lot of money from Facebook stock, but were essentially very upset with how Facebook was being run at the time, and there's, believe me, I'm in no way here to shill for the current management of Facebook too. I think social media is just horrible for the country, but that's just one of the ones that I can kind of cite as like, hey, this is really cool stuff that we do.
So everything that you've described right now, from the strategy of the campaign to its tactical multi-channel implementation, is classic PR thinking. And that shows to the efficacy of the campaign too. Now, where I believe people get triggered is in the intent and potentially the ad hoc nature of what you do. And
Mhm.
again, being in PR and being a marketer, I call hypocrisy on that, because firms are doing exactly what you're doing, but you're doing it on a scale, I think, that upsets people. And you're crossing into a territory where people, as we began the conversation, ostensibly believe that this kind of influence isn't as ubiquitous as it actually is.
Yes.
One point that you've made repeatedly on the various news programs and talking head shows is the realization and open acknowledgement that what you do isn't an isolated case. Governments do this, influencers are doing it. You're open about it, and you get paid to do it in a transparent kind of way.
Yes.
But why do you think you get picked on for doing it if, in a sense, everyone is doing it? Are people unwilling or unable to accept the fact that we are swimming in a sea of influence and manipulation? I mean, to
We're
me,
the most
that's why I love having you on, which is you're a mirror to our society, where you remove this pretentious mask of
Well, the great
credulity.
example of this sort of piousness, this false
Yes.
piousness, was with there was a thing we were doing in New Orleans to get a power plant approved. This was several years ago, and we brought in people who supported the power plant, and we compensated them to speak in favor of what they already spoke in favor of. I mean, anyone who's gone to New Orleans knows they need more power because the power is always they're always losing power, right? So they need another power plant. So number one, so a couple things about that. So this I'll dissect this because it's been covered a lot in the media and mostly kind of falsely. So number one, we compensated people who already were in favor of this power plant to turn out in and speak in favor of the plant, which was sorely needed by the city of New Orleans. Right now, it's one of those cases where um the other side was actually doing the same thing. My understanding is they were busing in these people from Vietnamese living centers who didn't speak English, so they had no idea what they were talking about. And I don't know how they were getting paid, but my understanding was there were buses there carting these people, so someone paid for these buses, right? And these eco people, the Greenpeace people or whatever, were involved, and there were paid staffers on the ground. That's all my impression. If people have information that contradicts that, please send that to me. But that was my understanding. So my understanding is you're in your typical battle of you have one side with money, you have another side with money, right? Okay, so we compensated people. They compensated people maybe in a slightly different way, right? So now some far left wackadoodle person, a reporter who strikes me as one of these guys with all the arrows, and the newspaper clippings in his mom's basement, right? Writes this piece that kind of goes viral, kind of documenting that what happened. So what I think was really interesting is then the New Orleans City Council, I mean, comes and asks me to testify and is like trying to lecture me on how to do my own business, when it's like people go into the New Orleans City Council with briefcases full of cash, right? I mean, like, I will not be lectured by the New Orleans City Council on ethics. I mean, give me a effing break. So like I think it's this false piousness, and it suits these people very well to have false piousness. Why? Because you're able to actually to cover up your own actions, which are far worse, through that false piousness. So it's like what we do is pay people to attend and show up in favor of the events that they already support, whereas what they're doing is probably taking bribes, giving sinecures to political campaign contributors, giving sweetheart deals to political campaign contributors, and doing all the same things. It's that false piousness so what we do is we're so upfront about what we do is that we compensate these people. So it gives people a good punching bag to sort of say, oh, well, he is the problem, the rest of us are not the problem. This is a country where you can buy yourself an ambassadorship if you give enough money and to the Republican or the Democratic winning presidential.
Absolutely. And as I illustrate, it's not only events and protests, but it's the very media that we consume.
Yes.
A vast majority of it is programmed.
Yes, correct. So I think where I always say, and you referenced the other shows that I've been on, what I always say is it's incumbent to, as a consumer of news, to understand they're being marketed to. Like I watch the news like I'm watching the Super Bowl ads, right? So if I see an ad for Cheetos, I hate Cheetos, right? I don't care how good the ad is. I don't care if you have like the hottest celebrity eating Cheetos like naked, right? You're not going to make Cheetos sexy, right? So I'm never going to eat your Cheetos. So I understand that you're being marketed to. So when you're reading, like you referred to at the start of this piece about the New York Times, right? And saying, well, the PR firm has set up those articles. So I read every newspaper knowing the fact that that is the case. So now my question to myself is, do I agree with the company that's being marketed? Do I agree with the cause that's being marketed, or do I not? But I understand that media is marketing. So I think that where people have to understand and be realistic is that given that you have to understand that you're always being marketed to, and to understand that every avenue, when you open up Twitter, when you open up Instagram, when you open up TikTok, when you open up the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Breitbart, it's like watching a Super Bowl ad. Someone is trying to market to you. It's for you to decide, do I want the product or do I not want the product? So I think there's this naivete in trying to think that you're not being marketed to when you are. And we're all savvy people, and we know, like, I know Trump supporters, there's no way that a Trump supporter would ever be kind of persuaded to dislike Trump in many cases. And there's no way that an anti-Trump person would be persuaded to like Trump, right? Now, there are people in the middle who might be able to be persuaded. It's the same thing. There are people who are going to buy flaming hot Doritos, whether Doritos advertises or not, because they're addicted, right? And there are people like me who will never eat it no matter how much they advertise, because I think it's disgusting, right? So there are people in the middle, and those are the people you're marketing to.
Yeah, and I think part of the outrage comes from this notion that overt manipulation,
Mm-hmm.
some interest, a special interest, a broad interest, is paying you and your company money
Yeah.
to assemble a crowd of protesters, which ostensibly, at least based on that naive zeitgeist that you describe, are free agents, in the sense that by their own volition, they have gathered together to protest Trump.
Yeah.
Because now we have Trump protests that are erupting. Now, on the Democrat side, they would say, of course, look at what he's doing. He's wheeling in the National Guard. He's just issued his own meme coin and made $5 billion.
Yes.
The guy's corrupt and he's overextending the unitary executive. And of
All
course,
very
people are taking to the streets. So from your vantage point, I'm tacitly assuming that some of this pay to play might be taking place on the ostensibly pure and democratic Democrat side.
Well, I don't think anyone's pure. And I think both part of what I try to explain to Republican and Democrats is both sides do this in some way, right? The Tea Party was bought and paid for by the Koch brothers, right? That's how they got it out there. And I was talking to Lawrence Jones of Fox News, and he was very testy when I said that. He was like, "No, the Tea Party was filled with people who supported the cause." I was like, "Yes, they did, but they were also." There was money behind it, right?
Yeah, you need a little help from your friends,
So
right?
here's the thing. Both can be true. There are liberal protesters opposing Trump for all the reasons that you eloquently articulated, and there's money behind it. There are conservative people who love what Trump is doing, and there's money behind it. That's also okay. So I think there's that naivete is to suggest that somehow the existence of money delegitimizes the protesters, right? When, like, Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson or Joe Rogan or Rachel Maddow are getting paid 8 figures or more per year to spout their views, right? So there's this idea that, well, those are their legitimate views, okay? I subscribe to that. I think, let's just say they are their real views. Well, so Joe Rogan, who's getting paid hundreds of millions of dollars, when he gets paid hundreds of millions of dollars, that's his real view. But when someone gets paid a few $100s to go to a protest, oh no, they don't really believe it. Like, how do you square those things is my question. Number one. So, and I've never heard a good answer for that.
Yeah, yeah. I watched many of your clips, and Chris Cuomo couldn't handle it, and you absolutely triggered the OAN guy who lost it on you.
Dan, yeah.
And I think he ended the interview because he couldn't handle it anymore.
Well, he doesn't want to. None of them want to face up to the fact that they themselves are part of that system, right? And that they themselves are part of the system, and they want all of these commentators, left, right, I'm not going to even name the specific people, but they would say, well, what I'm saying is because is my completely honest view. So when they're getting paid 6, 7, 8 figures per year. And meanwhile, the person getting paid a few $100s, oh, they don't care at all. And it's like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I'll give another analogy here is that, so before the year 1911, that's really just over 100 years ago, members of the British Parliament were unpaid for their services, right? So who do you think was represented in the British Parliament, and who do you think was not represented in the British Parliament? Right? So the British Parliament was a parliament of land-owning gentry who could afford to work for free, both for ego and for continued self-enrichment. So they'd work to put on the wig and to say they're a member of parliament, number one. And number two, because they would be able to use their seat in parliament to further enrich themselves, right? So when I look at, if you didn't compensate protesters, who would be able to protest? People who are tech workers and have flex time, people who are retired, people who have trust funds, right? People who don't have kids, right? So what I'm saying is you're getting a very small group of the population who is able to protest. So then someone was like, oh, well, the idea is that you should sacrifice to protest. Okay, well, is it fair that some people should have to sacrifice a whole lot more than others, right? Like, I don't have kids, right? And I can work my own hours. So for me to attend a protest, right, would be very easy. I could go to attend a protest, whereas do you know who you don't see a lot of protests? Housekeepers, janitors, right?
Yeah, because they're busy working. And
But
and
but
frankly,
I
I would
protest.
rather have you, Adam, organizing that protest than, let's say, the Iranian government,
That's right.
which
And
has tremendous influence over our universities. And if you think for a second that there's no connection
yeah,
between Mideastern money and the campus protests, then there's something really strong that you're smoking.
there are, and there's a lot of money on all sides of that. In fairness, there's a ton of money on the Israel side and on the Palestine side. I mean, I don't like to even say that in regards to side, because I don't. APAC and Qatar or whoever, they don't speak for the people of those places at all. So I don't pretend that they do. They would have you believe that they do, but I don't think they do. So but in terms of what we do, we have janitors at our protests. We have housekeepers at our protests.
Yeah, this to me is one of the most fascinating aspects of what you do, which is this democratization
Yeah.
of paid protesting.
Yes.
Because it's a complete inversion of the outrage. Because people are high and dry complaining about what you do because they claim it's anti-democratic, that special interests are not only infiltrating our media and our politicians, but are influencing and even creating our protests. And
Yeah.
you're saying it's going to happen anyway. It's happening anyway. And at least we're giving people a job.
Well, and understand that you're being marketed to, because so
Yeah.
this is another thing analogy I like to use. So because like this whole grassroots versus astroturf, right? So and people like to call me astroturf, right? Um And here's the thing about grassroots, it does not exist. So let me work you through something that most people would consider a very grassroots event, and why it's not grassroots, or what the astroturf component is in it, right? So let's just say a few moms get together and say, we want to have better school books in our kids' schools, right? The books we have are really old, and we want to have better books. Okay, well, the moms get together, they meet every afternoon or a few afternoons a week. They make signs, they go to speak to their school board meetings. They write, they make calls to the school board members, right? And eventually, after a few months, the school board, decides to vote to have the new books. Well, I'll tell you this, you just witnessed a very well funded protest, right? I'll tell you, these moms were not housekeepers. right? This was something you'd probably see at either a wealthy or middle or upper middle class school, where the moms are either stay-at-home moms, or probably mostly stay-at-home moms, maybe flex work type job, right? Where they have the kind of time, right? So essentially the people who funded the protest was the husband, right? So if you're the housewives, I mean, I
It's such a fascinating way of looking at American democracy and inequality. I absolutely love it.
test, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and I'm not trying to be sexist, because it could go the other way around. It just happens to be that it's unlikely to be that case. But the husband's funded that protest because the husband is working and funding so that the wife doesn't have to work, so that they can organize all of this stuff. But the housekeeper, the Walgreens clerk, isn't being able to do that, right? Like no Walgreens clerk or CVS clerk is going to be able to go meet 3 nights a week with the moms and make the calls and go to the school board meetings. That probably rarely ever happens, right? So it's the women who are already from well-to-do backgrounds who are able to do that. But most people would say, oh well, that's a grassroots event because no one ever received compensation. Well, they did, just indirectly through their husbands or through their own.
Yeah, this aspect of your pitch is what I believe triggered most of the pundits the most. And
Yeah,
I find it just such a fascinating, again, inversion of democracy. And it's also a mirroring and acknowledgement of the power of certain influencers in certain segments of our economy. It's money. You could look at the same thing in the academy. A university professor, a member of the board of Harvard with an endowment of $53 billion is disproportionately powerful compared to ostensibly the plebes that they serve, right?
I think
So I just find it a fascinating point of view. And again, it illustrates the charm of this in a paradoxical kind of way.
Oh, I agree, and it is the charm, because I think we're able to essentially we're democratizing it. And a lot of people don't like the fact that we're democratizing it, the because because they I think a lot of people are just sincerely delusional. Some of them are malevolent, and I think some are just sincerely delusional. And part of why I go on podcasts is to make my views known, and so that people can see, wait, I hadn't ever thought about it in this way. Um, is that there is really no such thing as grassroots, or very difficult, because it just, like, all the movements that people like, whether it's on the left, gay rights, civil rights, whatever, right, or on the right, Tea Party, MAGA, whatever, right, cryptocurrency. I mean, those are all these are massively funded movements. Um, but but I always use Jeb Bush as the example of, this is what how you merely putting money behind something is not a guarantee of success, right? Jeb Bush's campaign had hundreds of millions of dollars behind it, but Jeb Bush was not a compelling candidate, right? So what the hundreds of millions of dollars did for Jeb, exclamation mark, was that was his slogan, Jeb exclamation mark, right?
I
Um,
remember. That's
it,
right.
uh, what they did was they got his name on the map. Everybody knew who Jeb Bush was. They just decided that they didn't like what he was proposing, right, in his style. So therefore, he failed miserably, right? So money buys visibility. And the more money you have, the more you can make sure you're getting the visibility. But ultimately, the message has to be compelling.
Well, look at the Kamala campaign. It was about
Yeah,
$1 billion in conservative estimates,
I bet.
and Trump won.
Yeah.
So that's $1,000 million in ad spend.
That was kind of a fraud perpetrated on her donors. I mean, Kamala is just a such a great example of somebody who can play. A lot of people like that, like Kamala or Jeb, can play to the top, and get the money, but they can't play to the people and get the votes, right? Um, so
So it's
combat,
a combination of factors.
yeah,
You need the critical mass, but you also need the personality and the engagement.
correct.
What would you say though to the ad hoc nature of your clients? So to me too, and this is not derogatory, you sound like the happy hooker of protesting, right? So you'll take one side or you'll take the other. They got the money, and you're a believer in this model of paradoxical democratization through what you do, and the fact that everyone is doing it.
Number one, within an over the what's called the Overton window, right, which is of acceptable political discourse. So number one, we don't take money from hate groups or foreign countries.
Okay, I just wanted to focus on that. So if a neo-Nazi group, let's say, says that you're going to protest in front of a synagogue, then
They
that
contacted us, those types of people. So we don't have an interest in working with them, right? Of course, I guess it should. I mean, and by the way, I support their right to protest. So just so that I'm very clear, I'm a First Amendment practical absolutist. So I support that neo-Nazi group's right
yeah,
to
and I do
protest
too.
if
Just
they
in
want.
transparency,
No,
I'm Jewish,
I
and
wouldn't be a part of
I actually grew up in Skokie, Illinois, when the Nazis were going to protest, and I was like 12 years old, 13 years old, and I said, "Let them protest. We could go out there. We could go out there and kick their ass. We're allowed to do that, but we have to let them protest." So
they have
I'm
to
with you.
protest, and you can counter protest, right? And let the depravity of their message sh- like show for itself. I mean, the fact that they were doing something so detestable, and not only a neo-Nazi, but in a place with many Holocaust survivors, right? I think let them show their own depravity is my opinion. But of course,
Agreed.
demand would have no desire or interest in taking that on.
So
Um,
where do you draw the line, though?
so this is a very it's a subjective question, and unfortunately, the answer is like I'm sort of the one who gets to decide that, based on number one, what's effective, and number two, um, we would never do the same like issue two sides, right? So let's just say it was Amazon union versus Amazon management. We wouldn't like do protests for both sides, right? We'd have to pick which side. But for example, we might work for management in a particular case, and we might work for labor in another case, right? So it's the same thing. And I like to be on the side of common sense. So if I feel like I can't succeed, then I might respectfully reject a campaign. Sometimes I'd say, well, it's anything is almost you could succeed with anything, but you might need like a lot more money. But I try to be on the side of common sense. So let's just say, like hypothetically, I'm on the side of law and order of like let's not allow people to use open air drug use in San Francisco and LA, right? So maybe that's the conservative position, but maybe I would be on the side of don't bring in the National Guard and overreach federal power um on cities, and that might be a liberal position, right? So they're not mutually exclusive. We are not a right or left wing firm. I'm very much an independent politically, and I like as I've gotten older, I've been trying to have the protests that we take align more with my sort of common sense, independent views of trying to hold power accountable. So if there's a conservative overreach, we are with the liberals, and if it's liberal overreach, we're with the conservatives. And I'm proud to be on this David versus Goliath side, I guess.
Yeah, and perhaps that's why I love having you as a guest, like-minded souls, where you end up alienating, in a sense, everybody because
I don't mind. I don't. What I like to say is, I prefer to be more like a Bill Maher type of person. It's not alienating people. It's we have a set of principles and we work within those principles.
no, I
Um,
understand, but everyone is so tribal and, to your
yeah,
point, naive, that
we're
the
not taking
second you
America.
take on a position that's
Yeah,
not within their own tribe, you're the
yeah,
enemy. And
correct. And
since
one
you're
thing people try
perceived
to
to
do,
flip-flop, right?
which I don't agree with, that a lot of people try to then be like, oh, well, this side is using paid protesters, this side is using paid protesters, as if somehow that delegitimizes your view. That's like saying you're hiring a lawyer. You're hiring a PR firm. You're doing TV advertising. Like, do those things delegitimize your message? No.
1,000%. And again, that's why I love having you on, because
Yeah,
I'm a libertarian at heart. And
yeah,
what you're saying is just music to my ears, because it just peels away this veneer of BS that's so
yeah.
pervasive. And the fact that you're so clearly nonpartisan in this sense is great too. The
Well, very
question,
much.
though, becomes why now? So you've been in business since 2012, is that right?
That's right.
And now the administrations have been oscillating. We've
Yeah.
gone from Obama to Trump to Biden back to Trump, and we live in a different world. So now you've gone really public with what you do and
Yeah.
how you're doing it. And Doyle Brunson, just as an example, he's the poker god from a couple generations ago. He wrote a book called Super System, where he just kind of shows this stuff. Like, he goes heavy, he bluffs a lot. And then it whiplashed back on him because people knew what he was doing after years of taking everyone's money. So part of that begs the question of why you're doing what you're doing and why you're doing what you're doing now.
Because I'll tell you why. There's so much misinformation about what we do that it's critical for a couple reasons. Number one, I want to make sure that I'm a more effective advocate if I can change how people perceive our services. So it makes me better at my job if people understand what we do in the context of the broader publicity campaigns, in the broader political advocacy campaigns. Number one. Number two, there's just a lot of pure misinformation and fiction that's going to be spread whether I talk about it or not. And if I talk about it, it helps rebut it. So, for example, there's a lot of misinformation that we engage in rioting or violence or looting. That's not true. So, it's important that I go on there to say we only do things by the law, right? By the book, in that regard, right? So those are the two major reasons is to essentially to rebut the sort of misinformation on the ethical side, right? To kind of try to make the ethical case for why this is actually not a bad thing, and to lay out just the pure facts of no, we don't engage in illegal activity. And it's one of those things where if you don't go out there, then you will be defined solely by what your critics say.
Yeah.
And that's why I've been out there kind of doing these kinds of media.
Excellent. Transparency, right? Is
Yeah.
is part of
I'm a
the
pretty transparent
strategy.
person. And
Which
people always say, if you're transparent, why won't you disclose your clients? Well, I have a little more work to do on that because I want to get to that state where we can do that. But right now, because there is this sort of negative narrative attached to what we do, I'm not in a position to do that. But very soon, I'm hoping that we can do that and the clients want to say this is powered by crowds on demand.
yeah,
But
yeah.
that's
Crowds on demand inside.
yeah, exactly. And that's I want people to be as proud to work with us as they would be to work with anyone else.
Yeah, and I have to say that's what I love most about your overall point of view and your company is this overarching transparency, which is, again, when I was at the PR firm and a reputable major global one, we were sneaking around doing this in the sense of who knew? Those New York Times readers had no idea that
Yeah.
20-30% of what they were reading was paid for.
Yes, yes.
So,
Now you people should know, and it shouldn't actually make you what I'm hoping is it doesn't make people skeptical and distance uninspired. It actually makes people say, look, I am being marketed to everywhere, but I need to use my best judgment of if they're making a good point. Like I said, if you're making a good ad, I'll buy your product. If the product is bad, I'm not going to buy it. But understanding that you're being marketed to, and we're just one of the groups that are marketing to you, and that's okay.
so if there's a good libertarian style small government cause, and Adam and his team just happen to have organized a rally and a protest to support it, then hey, I'm on
I
board
think that's
too.
great. I think libertarians are like a great part of the political ecosystem because they hold the principled ones will hold both right and left accountable for their excesses, right? Because Republicans have tried to kind of co-opt libertarianism, and yet they keep pushing big government. The Republicans keep
Over
having
the top governmental
like,
control.
so my thing
Absolutely.
with libertarians is don't sell out to the Republicans because they will never be a small government party. They like wars, they like debt, they like government overreach, and they like a very strong police state. So none of those are in keeping. Obviously, liberals want to spend to death, tax to death, right? So libertarians are should be a important vehicle in holding both parties accountable, and do not sell out your name to the highest bidder.
Absolutely. And with that, I want to thank you for joining me here on Bald Ambition. If a listener has the wherewithal and funds to create an influencer initiative with your assistance, how do they go about doing that? Do they contact you? I want to pitch you a little bit.
www.crowdsondemand.com. That's crowdsondemand.com. Follow me on Twitter at CEO Adam Swart. That's CEO and then my
Great.
name.
And I'll put the links in the description as well. And once again, I want to thank you for joining me.
If you want to send me hate mail, you can do that too. So feel free to send me hate mail too, but try to be nice about it. Try to make some interesting points if you're going to send me hate mail. I get a lot of it, so like I'll read your hate mail more if it's an articulate one. So that's just my.
And in that sense, it's been a joy providing a counterpoint to that, because
Yeah,
I think I get you,
yes, you.
and I just find your entire initiative fascinating and paradoxical in so many ways. And if nothing else, you do put up that mirror of hypocrisy and naivete to America in 2025, where, come on, people, what planet are you living on
Yeah.
when you make these claims that we're all independent agents acting from our own volition, and influencers and paid promotion is part of a vast conspiracy? It's not. It's ubiquitous.
Ubiquitous. It's just part of the landscape. And be good consumers of the news. And yeah, feel free to get in touch. Crowdsonman.com at CEO Adam Swart. Mookie, this has been a blast hanging out with you this past hour. And I hope your listeners enjoyed it as much as I did.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Adam. Take care. Bye-bye.